Xtreme Defender type bullets loaded into cartridges here. Are these better than jacketed hollow points? And I get a lot of comments, especially when I test them. And generally I test them, you know, one caliber of these versus another caliber of these and see how they compare. A lot of people will tell me that they're extremely more effective, they'll stop threats better, they do more damage, stuff like that. And I thought, you know what, I haven't really seen anybody test them in a way that I think is a fair comparison to test them. I've seen just a lot of speculation saying that this looks like a lot of damage, this would do better, etc., etc. Or somebody will tell me they shot a hog with one and it did better than a jacketed hollow point. And that's not really solid information in my opinion. So what I want to do is I want to compare these to a traditional jacketed hollow point and more of a fair test. And one of the biggest downfalls I see when people test stuff like this is they'll use how they're typically loaded, and that is like a 68 grain 9mm plus P plus P plus something like that, and they'll compare it to like a 124 grain 9mm jacketed hollow point. The thing about that is you're taking a really light for caliber, like half the weight of a typical weight of a cartridge, and you're pushing it 200, 300, 400 feet per second faster, and then they're saying, well, it's got more energy dump in that gel, there's more damage in that gel. And my thinking is, well, duh, that's going to happen when you launch a projectile that weight, that low of weight, with that low of sectional density that fast. It's going to lose its momentum very quickly and put most of its energy, right away, and make it look like there's a lot of damage. So what I want to do here is I want to get similar weight cartridges, similar bullet weights, similar diameter, and similar velocity and energy. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to test the Xtreme Defender, which is actually called the Xtreme Hunter, and our 357 Magnum. This is a 120 grain fluted bullet. It's the Extreme Defense bullet. And I want to compare that to 357 SIG Federal HST 125 grain jacketed hollow point. So there's a difference in these of 5 grains, with the HST just being 5 grains heavier. So I've tested these in the past through my 4-inch barrel Smith & Wesson 686 and this 357 SIG through my 5-inch M&P, and what I got was 1498 feet per second on average with this Extreme Defense 120 grain bullet, and the 357 SIG 1452 feet per second. So very similar, but this is a little bit heavier, which brings our energies a little bit closer. This was 598 foot-pounds energy with a 120 grain bullet, and this was 585, a difference of 13 foot-pounds energy in the past. So very similar bullet weights, similar diameter, 355, 357, 125, 120 grain, almost the same energy. So we're bringing this velocity down to a level where, getting the smoke and mirrors out of the way. This hitting at about the same velocity as this, we're going to see whether those flute designs here are better than a jacketed hollow point that will then expand. One of the other things I hear a lot about is, well, I'm using clear ballistics. A lot of people use organic gel, and it only shows in organic gel, it doesn't show in clear ballistics, but the damage with jacketed hollow point show in clear ballistics, so it should also show with this. And whether it's organic or synthetic, it is all gel. But that's why I use that medium density fiberboard, because sometimes that can be more of a real world simulation, because when you hit something that's living, the bullet is going to hit something hard and possibly deform. And I also am going to do a hard barrier test through a windshield, and that will shed some light on this too, because sometimes even copper is going to deform some going through something like that, as is the jacketed hollow point. And will these flutes continue to hold up and do as well after hitting a hard barrier like that? So let me show a little bit closer in-depth view of what we're going to do here, and then we'll get started with this test. So I'm going to use my Smith & Wesson 686 with a 4 1/8 inch barrel versus the Smith & Wesson M&P 40 with the KKM 357 SIG barrel, 5.01 inch barrel. And I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time, see how those cartridges compare for velocity and energy. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. I'm going to go into plain clear ballistics. That's what I call my best potential. Plain clear ballistics test, see what the best potential is, see if we got hollow point expansion and all of that. After that, I'm going to do more of my real world simulation where I go through 4 layers of denim on the first 3-inch piece here that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, we'll have a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard into more clear ballistics. That will be more of our real world simulation. Then after that, as you can see, I have a windshield here, so we're going to do our hard barrier test, go through the windshield. And when we go through the windshield, it's going to be the real world simulation where we have 4 layers of denim again, 3 inches of clear ballistics, a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard. And we'll compare that to what we saw with our real world simulation without the glass. Then I probably will shoot at my steel target just to kind of see what kind of practical accuracy I get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, I'm about 5 yards from the target. In the past, with this particular cartridge here, our 357 Magnum Xtreme Defender, I was getting 1498 feet per second. It's rated at 1700, by the way, but let's see what I get here. (1501), 1424, 1437, 1477, 1466. So I would say on average just a little bit less velocity in the past. Our 357 SIG in the past, I got 1452 feet per second average. Let's see what I get today. 1448, 1431, 1437, 1422, 1397. That's a little bit low. So when we look at our energy averages, I think we're still just a hair higher with our 357 Magnum, but they're going to be pretty similar for the amount of actual energy we got going on. Velocity a hair higher with the Xtreme Defender, but it's a little bit lighter bullet. But I think it's close enough that this is pretty fair in the way this is going to work out. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, our best potential plain clear ballistics. Let's see how these compare. So 357 Magnum. All right, let me hit that with our 357 SIG. Let's go take a look. All right, so there's some differences there, really, honestly, here. If we look at going in the first 3 inches here, we can clearly see with our 357 SIG up here on top, there's way more energy dump than the 357 Magnum. And it's putting a lot more energy dump, probably from expansion, in that first 3 inches. And then we have, you know, really good tearing and cutting here. We have really good hollow point expansion. We have a penetration that's about 12 inches even. Camera parallax will make my finger look like it's somewhere else, like the bullet's back further, but it's at 12 inches even. A 357 Magnum apparently has more damage going on in there. It looks like more impressive, but it's hard to really judge that. And I have seen slow motion of these type of bullets, and they do tend to tumble, even though they're supposed to really just create damage in a different way. However, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying that it's a fail because it tumbles. It's just that that's what I've seen in slow motion. And we have a pretty good amount of damage, and then that damage kind of peters off here about 15 inches, and then we go to about 21.5 inches of penetration, which is not too bad for penetration. Clear ballistics is a little less dense, and you get a couple more inches of penetration than our organic gel, so that's not too bad overall. Let's put on our denim, put on our MDF, see how these compare in more of our real world simulation. All right, 4 layers of denim, 3 inches of clear ballistics. You got to remember that, you know, clear ballistics, a couple inches of that stuff basically represents skin. So this is the elasticity of it. So that really is like our pectoral muscle. So after going through our pectoral muscle simulation, 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard for our ribs, see how our 357 Mag does through more of our real world simulation. All right, let me set that back up and hit it with the 357 SIG. All right, same real world test with our 357 SIG. Let's see how this compares. Let's go take a look. All right, so we got kind of the same thing, a little more energy dump with our 357 SIG in that first 3 inches. And then they hit the MDF, and what I'm seeing here is it looks like there's significantly more damage with the 357 SIG, even though the 357 mag went a lot deeper. And when I look at this first 3 inch piece here, after that, and our medium density fiberboard, any amateur can tell you what's going on right there. That Xtreme Defender bullet is beginning to tumble in this first 3 inches and hit that. So it was tumbling before it hit this. So that would explain a lot of that huge weird damage in the plain gel. Now when we look at our 357 SIG, there's actually a little piece of copper right there busted off. Hit so hard, and this is truly expanded. So we expanded in that first 3 inches before it hit our rim simulation and blew right through that. And quite a bit more damage going on. So when we look at our 357 Magnum, we had pretty good penetration. We're right there, about 19.5 inches of penetration. That's fine. But when we look at our 357 SIG, it really did dump more energy here, and we have really adequate, good penetration. The bullet kind of sucked back through that channel, but our entire channel we hit right at about 14.5 inches of penetration. That's actually pretty much textbook for cartridges that have pretty high stopping power, because it dumps that energy very quickly. It does all this tearing right here where it needs to do it. So in my opinion, in this particular test, the real world simulation, you know, even though we had kind of shallow penetration because of that huge energy dump in clear ballistics and plain clear ballistics, through more of our real world simulation, we had a better, I would say, better performance with our 357 SIG. That's just my opinion here. So let me put up the windshield. We'll put up new blocks. We'll hit the blocks through the windshield and see how they compare, more of that hard barrier test. All right, so we got our windshield up in place, and by the way, it's facing this way as if you're shooting into a vehicle. I know a lot of people will say, well, that's not something I would do. I'd be shooting out, but you gotta understand, it's a lot easier to set that windshield up at an angle against my setup here rather than rig something up to have it go the other way. So, you know, the angles at which they might be deflected really doesn't matter here. What we're looking at is just the performance of those bullets, regardless of if they go up from hitting a different angle versus down or something like that. So 357 Magnum, our whole front here is denim, 3 inches of clear ballistics, and I have a whole piece of medium density fiberboard, so we definitely will hit that. Plain clear ballistics. There's some other shots here, but where I'm shooting, there's no bullet impact. So 357 Magnum, let's see what this does. Now let me hit that with the 357 SIG. All right, 357 SIG, same thing here. So let's see how this compares. Let's take a look. All right, so I'm gonna admit it, in this particular test, it looks like the Xtreme Defender did a lot better. Now when we look at where we hit with this, this is actually pretty impressive. This is gonna be where I hit with the 357 SIG, and even after that glass and that denim, we still have a bunch of energy dump right here, and it hit, expanded. I think I've heard it quoted as much as 50% of your velocity can be robbed by that glass. I don't think it's that much, but there's a good chance this hit, you know, this at only 1,000 feet per second. So for it to continue to expand and do that, I'm really impressed with that, to be honest. Now our penetration is about 11¼ inches, and that's subpar. However, the type of target that one might be shooting at through glass, yeah, that's plenty of penetration. Now when we look at our 357 Magnum, it does appear that, again, there's tumbling. But I think in this situation, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing that it tumbled, because it still provided a lot of good damage going on in there. And we got a penetration of about 18½ inches. So that's spot on perfect penetration. So I'm not sure what those flutes look like. We're gonna cut those out and take a close-up look at them and see what kind of damage is going on. But I am gonna say that, you know, if you had a hard barrier in place, I think this pure copper bullet is going to do a little bit better than a jacketed hollow point. But in a straight up self-defense situation, I think our jacketed hollow point would do a little bit better. So let's take a close-up look at these, and I'm going to shoot at my steel to see what kind of just practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. I know that doesn't really matter in a test like this, but they were shooting really accurate at close range, so I want to see how they shoot. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets. Going through our plain gel, our 357 SIG is absolutely fantastic. You might almost say it had too much expansion because we only got into about the 11-inch mark. However, that's just plain clear ballistics. It's unlikely you're not going to hit clothing. You're not going to hit a bone of some kind, a rib. So I would say that overall, if you're hit with something like that, it's pretty much lights out. That did really good. Our Xtreme Defender bullet, much longer, obviously, because it didn't expand, and pretty much no change to that bullet other than slight marks from rifling on the side of that bullet. Now when we go through our medium density fiberboard, things change a little bit for our 357 SIG, but when we look at our 357 Mag Xtreme Defender, there's essentially no change to that. It's the same diameter. There's not really even any damage from that medium density fiberboard. Our 357 SIG, on the other hand, got a little bit smaller, so that gave us a little bit more ideal penetration. And honestly, when you look at bullets pulled from actual living creatures, they look a lot closer to this than this. So I would say our penetration is pretty ideal with our 357 or our 357 SIG, and we also had good expansion on that. Not quite as big as that, but acceptable. Now going through our auto glass, this is where things change up quite a bit. I'm actually surprised at the diameter that we got with our 357 SIG. That jacket held on there really well. It's not completely uniform expansion. That's just from the angle of the glass. One side of this here is bent off more. That's probably entered like this and hit the glass at that angle. But still, overall, just a really big expansion. That's better than I've seen with a lot of cartridges going through auto glass. Now with our Xtreme Defender, this is what we're working with here. We completely smashed those flutes. So what's going on is if you had to hit auto glass or something like that, if it's hard enough, it's going to completely remove those flutes. And those flutes are supposed to be what causes good damage in the target. Yet we still saw good damage in the target. So my opinion is that those flutes aren't necessarily disrupting tissue and doing all that. I think it is tumbling, and I think probably what happened when we went to the auto glass, we're just working with basically a wad cutter at this point, moving at pretty good velocity with a very hard material. It's going to punch deeper. It's probably not going to tumble quite as much. But yeah, we can kind of see that's part of the secret there with a cartridge like this, is that, you know, the sectional density is a little bit lower even in these because it's copper. We're tumbling. So it's not really magic here. It's just some basic principles of hitting fast with something that's kind of not very dense. You're either going to get tumbling or you're going to get it to not over penetrate most of the time in some way because it's a little bit lighter. So I'm not knocking this though. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that the marketing, I believe the marketing of it, how they say it works, is incorrect. If they marketed it differently, saying that, you know, it's less dense, it's not going to penetrate as far, it's going to tumble and cause damage, all of that, and potentially it's going to go straighter than a TUI and go deeper, stuff like that. I think it, you know, it has its place. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it's necessarily better than a jacketed hollow point. So that's a close-up look at those. All right, 40 yards from the target. I know a test like this isn't going to matter for accuracy when it comes to what we just tested with, you know, the design of the bullets. So there's not really going to be much usable information you're going to get from this. But 40 yards from the target, these shot pretty good at close range. I want to see how they shoot from 40 yards. So 357 Magnum. All right, so this did pretty good for me. 357 SIG. Let's see what this does. All right, I did definitely pull one to the right on my first shot, getting used to that trigger versus the revolver trigger. So let me back it up to 75 yards and then we'll wrap up this video and I'll mention more of what I feel about this ammo as a whole. All right, 75 yards from the target, just for fun. I do want to mention that case ejection with this 357 Magnum ammo is fantastic. Also, the felt recoil is a lot lower than typical full power 357 Magnum. So I am kind of surprised at how well it performs for its velocity and all that. So 75 yards, let's see if I make any hits. I definitely pulled one to the left. So 357 SIG. Those are very, very accurate rounds, both of them. So it seems like 357 SIG and 357 Mag, you can't go wrong for accuracy. But what I'm seeing from this test is pretty much what I thought I was going to see. I was hoping for a little bit more comparable penetration with our 357 SIG. But I used the Federal HST because that's one of the best 357 SIG loads out there. There's Gold Dot 2 and there's a few others that are okay. But if we really want to compare something that's kind of law enforcement grade or something you want to bet your life on, I'm going to use HST because we have sealed primers, sealed bullet nose, or at the bullet, it's sealed, which keeps out moisture and it makes that ammo have a really long shelf life. So you're not going to get corrosion or the powder getting messed up where it's not going to light off. So when it comes to something like this, I like the Federal HST for that, and also because it has a really good banded jacket to the core. It's not molecularly bonded, but it is essentially bonded with a big band on it, and that's what Critical Duty also does, as where Gold Dot and Winchester Ranger do more of a molecular bond. But the banding does hold that jacket on just as well. So you kind of need that when you want to look at getting really big expansion, but also have pretty good hard barrier penetration. So I would say overall the 357 SIG HST is still a really good cartridge here. And I would say in just regular personal defense, you're not really needing what that penetration that 357 Mag got. When you look at the 12 to 18 inches that the FBI sets as being that's what you need, a lot of that came from the 1986 Miami shootout, where some of the shots from handguns going through the bad guy's arm didn't reach his heart. So they needed to have a penetration that was equal to through an arm into the body, into about the center of the body for the minimum. So that minimum equated out to 12 inches in gel, in organic gel. But the thing is, most of the time, shots like that are not necessarily needed. You're going for a fun-on shot, and you basically need half as much penetration. And a lot of the real-world numbers here, statistics, when you look at like old school 357 mag, 125 grain, stuff like that, it's only penetrating 13 inches in gel, which is roughly half that in a human, and it's doing really good. It's the highest stopping power cartridge out there, 96% one-shot stop of recorded data. So I definitely trust numbers like that. And when we're looking here at going through the windshield though, I would say that our Xtreme Defender definitely held together better because it's one solid chunk of copper. So we're not going to get the expansion, and it makes sense that we're not getting expansion, so it's going to easily go a little bit deeper after it hits something hard. So I would definitely say, you know, when it comes to needing something to punch through a windshield, or probably even a car door or drywall or anything like that, I think the glass test pretty much represents all of that pretty well. Our Xtreme Defender is going to be a little bit better of a cartridge. But when we look at just straight up personal defense, I'm still sticking with it that I think the jacketed hollow point is going to be a better defense cartridge, because we have, you know, statistical data on that. And when we look at, you know, the statistical data, that's pretty much how you judge all other cartridges. If you look at like a 357 mag, 125 grain semi-jacketed hollow point does in the ballistic test, you try to get other cartridges to do kind of similar things. And if it does, you can pretty much say it's probably going to be as good. With the Xtreme Defender, there's so much different things going on. We can't reliably measure expansion. We can't reliably say it tumbles at a certain point. There's a lot of guesswork going on, and until there's really street numbers where a law enforcement agency uses them for a good amount of time and has some real data on it, we're really not going to know 100%. Now, I will admit here that when we're looking at some of these cartridges, not this one where it's 120 grain, but like the 68 grain plus P+, that might be where the secret sauce is, to where if you're getting that much velocity on that low of sectional density, flutes or no flutes, maybe that's really where it's at, because that bullet's going to be a lot shorter. It's not going to tumble as easily, and that might be, you know, better as far as damage it does versus a jacketed hollow point. But the design itself, in and of itself, going at the same velocity as a jacketed hollow point, I don't think that's really doing anything good here. But potentially the flutes work better when it's a lighter bullet, lighter than typical, going a lot faster than typical. So I'll have to look into that in the future, if I can do a better test like that and see how they compare. So judging from this, I'd say they're not bad. The Xtreme Defender's not bad, but I'm going to stick with jacketed hollow points. And this is, you know, I'm admitting that going through the auto glass, that Xtreme Defender did better. So I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that typical statistics would say that this 357 SIG did better for ability to stop a threat. So you can draw your own conclusions. Tell me what you think in the comments. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.